Please, Mommy. Please don't do this to me. I know I broke your heart. I know I never listened to you, but I'm so sorry. I'm too young and still need your help. What will I do without you?" Tracy said as she begged her mom on her knees. It was a terrible morning for Tracy as her ignorance and stubbornness caught up with her. She was already getting the result of her waywardness. It's too late for her to make amends. She'd have to get married to the man she never imagined getting married to as she was having a child for him. That morning when she found out about her pregnancy, her mother was so heartbroken and couldn't contend the shame of giving birth out of wedlock. Linda was sitting quietly in her room and the presence of her daughter lightened her mood, but the news she got after it was heartbreaking. She could barely smile, her lips was heavy. Hearing her daughter beg her, a child she trusted so much and had always sternly warned to stay away from men, was in her front pleading with her to forgive, she couldn't believe her ear. She sat shocked and couldn't talk for minutes. It's the pride of every mother to see their child get married before having a child, but for Linda Tracy's mother it was the absolute opposite. She was very pained. How could she, a reverend who condemned most of other girls in the neighborhood and in church, handle the situation of her daughter? She was so shame-sunken that she had no other choice but to make her child get married to the man who impregnated her. Since the death of her husband, Mrs. Linda tried her best to uphold her family's reputation by trying to raise her children well and decently. This explains why she was very disappointed at her daughter. "Tracy, you won't stay here begging me like I didn't do my best in raising you. I sacrificed so much, but this how you pay me back? By getting yourself pregnant?" her mother asked disappointedly. "Mommy, I am very sorry. I didn't know it'll happen like this, but Mommy, please, I'm still your daughter. I'm not ready for marriage and I am not ready to bear a child. I admit I made a very grave mistake, but please Mommy, give me one more chance." Tracy begged with eyes filled with tears. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Linda asked in shock. "You're already pregnant. Don't tell me you're trying to get rid of the baby, because never. Not under my watch," she continued. "The only way you can correct your mistakes, Tracy, is by marrying the man who impregnated you. Who is responsible?" No, please, Mummy," Tracy responded, stuttering. "Mummy, it's Pastor Adams that is responsible," she added. "Oh my God. Pastor Adams? The junior pastor? This is such an infiltration in the church. I warned you, Tracy," her mother said, looking at her disappointedly. "Mommy, I'm really sorry. I didn't know it'll be like this," she responded. "Get ready, Tracy, we're going to see Adams and his family. He has to take sole responsibility. You guys are getting married," her mother said as she stood up and left the sitting room. "Mommy, please, okay, at least prepare me for this phase of life. Please, Mommy," Tracy begged with her voice fading into distance. She was left alone in the living room to think about her dilemma. She soliloquized, she was in no way prepared for this phase of life that is coming at her speedily. But she has no choice but to accept her fate. She's from a Christian background and getting rid of the baby is not an option. What kind of mess have I gotten myself into? What have I done to myself? I am a baby myself, but now I'd have to bring life to this world and nurture a baby soon. I'm just 19 years old and unprepared for this. Should I secretly take care of this? But what if I die in the process? I won't. I would just listen to my mom and get married to Adam. My mom knows best after all my deaf ears put me in this situation," Tracy said as tears dropped down her eyes. Early the next morning, Tracy woke up and cried her eyes out, knowing that in no distant time she'd become a wife and mother, and she was in no way prepared. She'd not just be a wife but a wife to the pastor, and that comes with a lot of responsibility which she wouldn't be able to handle. For Mrs. Linda the whole situation felt so surreal, she couldn't believe it. She was also crying as it was a hard decision to make, but because of her position in the church she had to. She had fear of what people would say when they find out her daughter got pregnant out of wedlock, and for the pastor it'd be an abomination to the church, coupled with the fact that she always judged other people's children. However, she made a decision to secretly make Pastor Adam propose to her daughter and make it look like they both fell in love. The only way out of this situation is to make it look like Pastor Adams and my daughter fell in love, because how I face the shame of this. I have to convince Pastor to propose to her in church and get married to her as soon as possible. Mrs. Linda said as she entered her daughter's room. Get up. Get up, Tracy. She screamed at her daughter, why are you sleeping? It'd have been better if you slept all day rather than going to spread your legs for the pastor to get you pregnant. Will you get up? We have things to fix up, I warned you. Mrs. Linda continued as she continuously tapped her daughter who was sleeping. Mommy, please, I know, but I am sorry, just allow me have this child in your house and I'll never make this mistake again. Tracy begged with tears welled up in her eyes. Never. Tracy, we're going to Pastor Adams' place, prepare. Her mother added. Oh my God, what have I done to myself? Tracy said as she stood up to prepare. Mrs. Linda and Tracy, her daughter, headed for Pastor Adams' place, and when they got there Pastor Adams was pleased to have them visit. He was in the dark of what was about to happen, and the information was given to him. He was freeze in shock. He knew he always had an affair with Tracy, but he never knew the result would come so soon, and unknown to them he already had a fiancée who he was planning to get married to soon. And the news broke his heart. Pastor Adams, I'm glad you're home and I'm so happy that we didn't have to come another day. Your presence is a gift. Mrs. Linda said. Good day, Reverend. Ma, I'm pleased to have you in my home, please be comfortable. But Ma, this one you visited me all of a sudden, did I offend the church, or do I owe you or the church? Pastor Adams said in a funny way, trying to crack a joke. Little did he know that it was no time for jokes. Just get us water first so we can start our conversation as to why we paid you a surprise visit. Mrs. Linda said, looking at him sternly. Pastor Adams went and brought water and cola for them. He sat with all ears. Okay, Pastor Adams, my son, you know my daughter Tracy, have you both been close? Mrs. Linda asked, looking at him with a bit of disdain. Yes, ma'am, she's a friend in church and that's all. He responded. That's all indeed. Anyways, I don't have the time and energy to beat around the bush. My daughter here is pregnant and she says you're responsible. Mrs. Linda said in a scornful manner. Me? No, there should be a mistake somewhere. He turned to look at Tracy, but how, Tracy? I don't understand. Tell your mom, it's a mistake. He was very shocked and didn't expect what came at him. Pastor Adams, please don't deny me. If you do, my mother would send me away from her home. You know I'm not lying against you. You're the only man I know and have gotten intimate with. Tracy said pleadingly. But. Pastor Adams stuttered. I'm sorry, I have a fiancé and we're already planning to get married soon, he continued. What? No. You'll have to call off any further plans with your fiancé. My daughter is pregnant for you, and considering my position as a reverend and a wife of the late senior reverend. It's very shameful for my daughter to just come out of the blues pregnant without being married, and you, Pastor Adams, do you want to soil your name? Mrs. Linda said, standing with hands akimbo and looking directly into Pastor Adams' eyes. How would you feel when your name starts flying around the neighborhood and the church that you got my daughter pregnant and didn't take responsibility? Just call off with your fiancé and propose to my daughter in church on Sunday. Mrs. Linda added. But Reverend Ma, I. Pastor Adams stuttered. That's final, let's both avoid bringing shame to each other. Mrs. Linda said, looking at him with pale eyes. Tracy just sat on the chair. She could barely talk. Tears only kept rolling down her eyes. She sat there in regret and remorse for her actions, but she prayed Pastor Adams does as her mother says, so she doesn't end up ruining her family's reputation. After what seemed like a stern warning from Mrs. Linda, Pastor Adams was drowning in his thoughts. he wasn't ready to settle maritally, and if he doesn't get married to Tracy before any other person would find about Tracy's pregnancy, it'd be a total scandal. He was worried and his head was buried in his hands. He was torn between his faith and his reputation. He wasn't even sure if he loved her, but no matter what, he had to step up and fix things because he knew the gravity of what happened. I'm very sure he would have wanted to hear of this. But I'm taking accountability for my actions and I shall come in due time to marry your daughter. Pastor Adams said with his eyes filled with regrets and his face pale from worries. No problem, Pastor Adams, but you have to act fast. I have prayed on this and have seek God's permission and I know God will be with you. Mrs. Linda said with her worries written all over her face. Let's go, Tracy. Don't worry, God is with us all the step of the way, she said, looking at her daughter. Tracy stood up, waved at Pastor Adams and left. Some days later Pastor Adams came knocking at their house. Mrs. Linda's face was lit with happiness as she was very positive about Pastor Adams' response, finally to her, no one would find out about her daughter's mistakes. Tracy on her own part had acknowledged her mistakes and decided marriage was the best option for at the time. No one forced her, but she finally accepted to get married to Pastor Adams if he proposed to her. Pastor Adams came bearing flowers and gifts for Tracy and the Reverend, her mother. When he came into their sitting room he went on his knees and proposed to Tracy, even though he wasn't sure about it, but he knew he liked Tracy and had at different times fantasized about having a family with her. He had already resolved in his mind to get married to her and bring up their child in the most lovable way. Tracy, I know we both didn't bargain for this, at least not at this time, but it is with God's providence that it happened at a time like. I want us to set things straight, not only because of us both but for sake of our unborn child. Please, Tracy, will you marry me? Let's both do the right thing. Pastor Adams said as he listened to Tracy's response with ears wide open. Yes, I will marry, but I hope you understand that this is my first time doing life as a wife and as a mother-to-be, so you need to promise to love me and take good care of me. Tracy said with tears in her eyes. Congratulations, my children. Well, have a wedding to plan. Mrs. Linda cut in while clapping. We need announce it at church this Sunday and begin the proper preparation, she continued. Yes, I promise to love you, Tracy, and our child. Pastor Adams responded to Tracy. Irrespective of her reservation when everything first happened, Tracy became quite happy about getting married to Pastor Adams. The both got married, and when her baby bumps became very visible, both the church and everyone in their neighborhood didn't suspect anything. They only saw it as a blessing to Pastor Adams' family. They both lived in a house close to the church, so Pastor Adams can effectively carry out his duties as an assistant pastor. Months later, Tracy baby bump was very visible, and it didn't take long until she gave birth. She gave birth to a girl and they both named her Rita. Pastor Adams so much loved his tiny little girl, but after the birth of Rita, Tracy found herself withdrawing as a mother and as a wife. The way she expected it wasn't the way it was going. She overwhelmed with the responsibility that came with childbearing, she would constantly withdraw and in most cases forget about her child. Darling, where's Rita? Pastor Adams asked his wife, and they hurriedly entered their car one Sunday morning as they were heading for church. Oh my God, she's sleeping, go get her please, Tracy responded with a look of "not again" written all over her face. Continuously she'd ignore the crying baby or not just attend to the baby, especially when her husband wasn't home, and any opportunity she gets she leaves her baby for mother while she goes about her other respective activities, both home and church alike. Pastor Adams wasn't comfortable with the idea of his wife always neglecting their baby, and he tried to talk to her about it sometimes, but it felt as if the more he spoke about it the more it worsened. Even Tracy herself didn't know how to explain her situation. She was always feeling guilty about the whole situation, and each time she tried to avoid it doesn't work. Her mom equally tried to coach her into motherhood and properly advised her, since she always ran to her for advice. One fateful day, however, something that became an eye-opener for Tracy happened. She was outside under the comfort of a cozy tree reading books and preparing her sermons for the children. Department. Her daughter Rita cried and she could hear her cries but turned deaf ears with intent that one of the helps would attend to her, but she forgot that day was a free day for the helps. Neither her husband nor her mother was with them on that day. Because she was more concerned about her work, she didn't hear when her daughter stopped crying. Rita went silent and Tracy didn't notice. It was at the same time that Pastor Adams came and asked about the whereabouts of his daughter, and given no absolute answer he headed into his daughter's room, and from outside his wife Tracy heard him scream and she rushed in as well. "Darling, I see you're getting ready for the children retreat. How's Rita?" Pastor Adams asked as he gave his wife a peck on the cheeks. "Oh, she's with Elizabeth the help. She was crying. I guess Elizabeth picked her up," she said, unsure. Pastor Adams, not satisfied, went upstairs to meet his daughter. On getting there he met his daughter not breathing. A bag of clothes that wasn't kept well fell to her face and must have suffocated her, and no one was inside the house. He recalled it was off day for his help and he cried and screamed, "Oh no! My baby! No! No! My little pretty girl, Daddy's here, please wake up." Pastor Adams cried. He picked up his phone to call the Reverend, his mother-in-law. "What's the matter, darling?" Tracy said as she came into the room panicking. "Have you seen what the devil has done?" her husband said. Tracy couldn't believe her eyes. It was at that moment that she saw and realized she had been neglecting her daughter. Her daughter laid there in their front not breathing. She was paralyzed in fear. Immediately her mother came in and was shocked. Amidst tears she carried the baby and rushed to her car. Both husband and wife followed her and baby Rita was rushed to the hospital. It's my fault, Tracy cried and knelt on the floor of the hospital and cried. Her mom and husband tried to console her. "No, my daughter, you're a first-time mom. Sometimes things like this can happen. You were still trying to adapt, and now God will have mercy on Rita, and with this you'll learn and be able to always care for her, knowing your child depends on you," her mother said. Pastor Adams knelt beside his wife, held her hands, assured that all will be fine. They both kept praying while the doctors attended to their daughter. Luckily for her, the doctor came out with good news. Their daughter was placed on oxygen. If they hadn't rushed her at the time to the hospital, she would have died. "Darling, you're not at fault, but this was a close call. I hope you'll brace up, and I pray God helps us both take good care of the child He has given us," Pastor Adams said in a prayerful way. "Amen," both Tracy and Mrs. Linda chorused. "I am really sorry, my husband. I'll brace up," Tracy continued. After days their daughter was discharged from the hospital. Both the parents and grandmother were very happy, and they did a Thanksgiving at church. They gave testimony on how God saved their child. Tracy began to change. It was not a fast process, but she was gradually getting better. She was always receiving advice and motherhood lessons from her mom, and she couldn't stay away from her son. One night, while she laid cradling her baby, she looks at her in the eyes and apologized for being a bad mother. Pastor Adams walked in and held her by the waist and promised to help go through motherhood and give her and their daughter all the love she needs. "Rita, my baby, your mom is very sorry for neglecting you. I never meant to, but I was still adjusting to this life, but it's not an excuse, and that's why I will become much better for you. I love you, and your dad does as well. Your grandma loves you even more." Tracy chuckled and said amidst tears, "My wife, I love you, and our daughter have heard you. I'll also help you to get through this phase of motherhood, and I'm glad we're blessed with a mother like yours who would help us. God bless her abundantly," he said with his hands wrapped around his wife's waist. "Thank you so much, Pastor Adams. You're the best husband in the world. God bless you," she said, and they both kissed. The family invited the church and some people around the neighborhood for celebration as God saved their daughter from a near-death situation. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification to be notified when we post new videos.